John Bonham was an incredible drummer, but it's not technical. It's not that technical. If you take the drum part out, it's like this. You put a click on it, it's all over the shop. It's not about the click. It's about music.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, the legendary Tommy Aldridge. Tommy, welcome to Drumeo.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here.
That was awesome.
Oh, cool.
I know many of you out there have been requesting for us to bring in Tommy for years, since the early days of Drumeo, and we finally made it happen. So it's an absolute honor to have Tommy here with us. I'll let you grab some water and take a breath from that. But that was a song called Nowhere to Run by a project you recorded with called Iconic. And we're going to be doing another tune from Iconic later on. But for any of you who don't know who Tommy Aldridge is, please go check out some of his work and some of the projects he's played with. To name a few, Whitesnake, Ozzy Osbourne with Randy Rhoads, Gary Moore, Pat Travers, Black Oak, Arkansas, and many, many others. Tommy is a legend in the heavy metal world when it comes to double bass and all the stuff you've done. So it's an absolute honor to have you here.
Likewise.
So we're talking about heavy metal drumming, grooves, fills. We're going to be going over some music. And I guess, why don't we just start off by talking about some double bass playing? You mentioned something really interesting this week where you talked about how you took what a lot of drummers were doing on the hi-hats with the hands, and you kind of transferred that over to the feet and assigned it to a different sound source.
Yeah, it was just something I worked around with in my studio, my little drum. Well, it was the shed where we stored all the lawn gear for the lawnmower and stuff when I was a kid, and it was just my way of finding different things to spread around the kit, just looking and searching for something to play in a way that I hadn't heard it done before. And it was one of my early goals when I'd go in my little drum shack to rehearse, was to go in there with maybe just a little idea, actually not much of anything, and come out with something that I hadn't heard someone would play before, some record or whatever. And I was quite young, when I was doing this stuff. So it was just a way to maybe apply things, rudiments and stuff, or figures on the kit in a way that was a little bit less than conventional.
Yeah. Do you have maybe an example of how you took kind of a basic groove and
Sure,
kind of converted that?
Absolutely. Well, just like a really common beat, and actually it's a figure that Lee Kerslake used on, I think it was... not over the mountain, but maybe, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know, was it, but he's playing essentially like slow. So I just took that same figure and I just, assigned the hi-hat part to the kick drums, which figure. Even though it was the same figure, when you played it that way, it sounded like kind of mondo and sounded much less disco-y than, because that's just a 60s disco beat, I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a 60s disco beat, but with some hair and teeth, So just ideas like that and just different simple approaches like that. And more than anything, it was a way to rehearse parts, to develop a little bit of fluency on the kick drums. And I'd sit in there for 20 minutes, 30 minutes and set, the metronome and I'd click at a tempo and just sit there and chop at that for a long time. And it was really boring. But what it did, it allowed me a little bit of headroom down there to where I didn't have to worry so much about that when I was doing this stuff on top.
Yeah, I love that. And you've talked a lot about that this week, about how you would take just one idea and you would literally just move it around the kit and explore in different ways.
I mean, I think a lot, John Bonham's calling card was his triplets, and the double on the kick drum. And again, when people heard that, when I heard it on Good Times, Bad Times, I said, wow, what the hell's going on there? And it was just two notes on the kick. And then I realized, well, it's something that had already been played, the same figure, so he just reassigned the one part of the figure to another, an atypical drum, because people weren't playing doubles that quick on the kick drum. It hadn't really occurred to anyone. I'd never heard it before that. Yeah. And so it was when I heard John Bonham, then it kind of gave me a little boost, like when you're a kid and you learn to actually do something that you've been working on, and you get some affirmation and some encouragement, and it gives you the hope to go on to the next move,
I love
a little
that.
Gratification along the way.
For sure.
So it was the same, I think the same principle maybe,
There's a few parts we're going to cover, and the first one is the Over the Mountain drum fill. You obviously played this, or the intro fill. You played this live a ton, and Lee played it on the studio album.
Yes.
Do you want to maybe show everyone what that is and how you kind of turn that into your version of that?
Yeah, my approach on that tune was just trying to make it, I'm not going to say heavy because it's already heavy, but Randy was always encouraging me to make things heavier and to really put whatever, do your interpretation of it.
Yeah.
You know, and he was very open about that, and he was really, really supportive and stuff, very encouraging in that place. And so I would do it in a way that was a little bit different than what Lee was playing. I'll play it slow, and it's just 16th note triplets with a flam beginning it. And what I did is I did the same thing. I just went. So that I could show off in the intro of Over the Mountain. I'm sorry, you know.
Yeah.
Bring a little bit of video into the program, and so that's how I played it. Was splitting the two doubles, and again, it's exact same part. It's just assigning it to a different drum, and so I didn't change the part. I mean, you have to faithfully reproduce the things that attract people to the music you're playing. If you go totally outside of some of the parts that are there, not follow the outline, you're not playing the song. So I tried to faithfully reproduce, you know, what was already there, but just approach it from my perspective. What I would have done if I'd have been on that session. That's all, you know. And again, Lee Kerslake played that, and I never, ever, in any circumstance, ever would take credit for someone else's drum part, you know. I was upset when I found out that my name appeared on that record, and his wasn't, and Bob Daisley's wasn't, but they were trying to get those guys off that record before it was even released, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. Were you guys, did you know each other? Did you, like back?
Lee?
Yeah.
I met Lee when he was with Uriah Heep, and we'd crossed paths, you know, many times before, and he's a sweetheart of a guy. And, you know, he had a struggle with some health issues, you know, for a long time and later on in his life. But he was always a sweetheart, you know, even after the Ozzy gig. And it's like I didn't fire him, you know.
Yeah.
I haven't fired any of these people. I'm just like a freelance drummer looking for something to sink my teeth in. And Randy Rhoads, I was working with Gary Moore, and the offer was extended. And this was before when Ozzy had already been out of Black Sabbath for a while, and there was some talk of him trying to resurface. But the talk was about the guitar player, this new guitar player that was coming out of it. And Gary Moore had, I think, heard some, because he was assigned to the same label, Jet Records, that signed Ozzy, which was, it was owned by Don Arden, as Sharon's father. And Gary had heard some of the guitar things or some of the rough demos or something somewhere along the line, and he had mentioned Randy Rhoads. So I'd heard Randy's name, but didn't have any idea who he was. And then he came to our rehearsal, and that's when I met him. And he wanted to meet Garrett because he's a huge Gary Moore fan.
Crazy. I love it.
Yeah.
When it came to, you added the twirls in the left hand, was that something that you were doing already at that point in time, or was that something that when you played that live, you realized that you needed to bring a visual element to that part?
Well, I thought that's been something that I haven't seriously concentrated on, but when I was growing up, and I learned even when I was a kid, and I would play out, and it was just feeble music. It was just copied cover stuff that you learn, you know, when you're a kid. And I learned, the first thing that I learned to do with a pair of sticks is to twirl them and throw them around before I could play anything on them. And so, because I didn't know what to do with them when I first got them, you know. So I figured, well, I'll find something to do with these guys, you know. I haven't a clue what else to do with them. And so I had that down before I actually playing, and I didn't start integrating into my playing until one time I was at one of these silly little, I don't know, when I was a kid in a junior high or something, we were playing at some little high school party or something, and I did a twirl, and everybody went, oh, that's crazy, man. And so I learned early on that it kind of, it's the video, you know, it's the video aspect of our instrument, so to speak. And so I learned that if I really made a fool of myself visually, it would kind of enhance whatever was happening, you know, in the audio department. And so it moved the drums to the front of the stage for that bar or for whatever. It just added import to what was going on.
Yeah.
Because at that time, too, I mean, this is before your time, and probably most everyone's watching this, but MTV was just coming in, and all of a sudden the video and the music, all of a sudden, boom, and it changed drastically the landscape of the music genre that I was in. Because it was primarily a rock show, you know. And most of the people that inhabited it was Aerosmith, you know, Guns N' Roses, you know, Def Leppard, all those different bands. And so there was a big shift in what became available to you as a musician.
Another thing you've played a lot of in your years, rock shuffles, double bass drum shuffles. A lot of people ask, should you start with the right? Should you start with the left? There's one tune you did with Whitesnake called Get Up that you did one of these grooves on. What's your approach to playing shuffles with the bass drums?
Yeah. Well, with Get Up, the body of it is pretty straight. It's just a single kick, and it's just an up-tempo shuffle. You know. And shuffles, for heavier shuffles, it's more of a triplet feel. Same figure, you know. And again, it's just an exercise that I did is it's boring, but it gives
works.
you a little bit a knowledge of going from a straight 16th to an 8th note triplet, you know,
Yeah.
and 16ths only, and I use that a lot in show. Use that a lot in shuffle stuff, and again, it was just practicing those, you know, the 16th notes. This is all child's play in this time, and
But still fundamentally important for...
I think so.
Yeah.
And it worked for me when I was coming up, and there's some crazy, unearthly, supernatural stuff going on kick drums these days.
Yeah.
But all of it is still a single stroke roll, the very first rudiment.
Yeah.
It's really tough to do multi strokes on the kick drums because you're not going to get the rebound that'll take you to the really, you know, the real tempos, you know.
And when you're doing that, just on a technical standpoint, like are you burying the beater into the kick drum when you're doing that? Are you allowing the drum or the pedal to rebound? Anything
I'm not
specific?
burying the beater. I learned, and this came later on when I started playing before I started playing two bass drums, I just got a crazy hair and I put my hi-hat on the right side and my bass drum on my left foot and just learned to play a lot of the same patterns that way. Just no one said you should do that because I didn't have anyone guiding me, you know. It was just a crazy thing that I spent time in my drum room rehearsing on. Mm-hmm. And then when I went to two bass drums, a good friend of mine, we used to set our drums up in my practice room facing one another and we'd trade off licks.
Nice.
He was a really good drummer, but he lost interest. And I'm saying this is when I was a kid, 10, 11 years, you know.
Yeah.
And so he lost interest and left his kit at my place, so I just pimped his bass drum and put it over here.
The rest is history.
Yeah, and so that's what I would do, and I would practice like doing a figure like. Just leading with the right foot, but it's really not that. The one is you're just resting on the one, and so you don't play the note on the 1, 2, 3, 5. As far, and so I learned not to bury the beater on the left side because I wasn't doing it on the right.
Gotcha.
And now. In my rehearsal room at home, I have a double pedal on a single kick, and that's become useful for me because if you keep the right foot planted or buried in the head when you play the left one, it's going to change and vice versa. So I think it's probably a good rule of thumb because most guys are double bassing into oblivion with a single kick and a double pedal, you know, so you don't have to have two bass drums. And practically speaking, in the studio, I never use a double setup kit. It's always a single because it's one mic, one kick drum. Both bass drums sound exactly the same, but it is the same. And just for practical matters, setup and room space and stuff in your drum room, you know.
Yeah. Awesome. There's another fill. We did a full playthrough of Bark at the Moon and kind of a breakdown of that song earlier this week. And there's one fill that I've loved my whole life, and I always wondered what was that fill. And in those breaks in Bark at the Moon, da-da, you do that one single stroke between, sometimes on the splash, sometimes you move it around the kit.
Oh, you mean at the end of that coming back in?
Yeah.
Oh.
Right after those hits or crashes.
In the middle section.
Yeah.
The middle back down. Yeah, I was just changing it around. You mean when we did it the other day? Oh, yeah, I was just changing the pad, a different sound source.
So like what would be, do you want to just break down that maybe the most basic version of that fill and then how you move that around?
Sure, I don't have the tempo voice. Just put the snare drum across, just cross between the snare drum and the splash. Same pattern, but instead of staying on the snare, just use half of it on the, or the first 3 or 4 notes of it, it's alternating between the splash.
So those are just alternating singles with doubles on the...
The kick drums are underneath it.
Yeah. Was that something maybe like in the session, maybe you just did it with the hands and then you realized it needed more bottom end underneath? And
no, it's like, in that case, we put all that stuff together in the studio. We came up with all the parts and stuff, and none of us had heard any of the stuff really until we started building it in the studio.
Yeah.
And so in the studio, I was trying to keep it clean. I mean, you can't hear any of that on that album because it's so poorly mixed. I mean, I don't know who mixed it, but he should be put to sleep immediately. But And as you go out on the road, it's the same reason most bands' first album is their best album, because they've lived with the material, they've played it, they've guinea pigged it, and they've found, you know, it's a process of elimination, no pun intended, you know, for me, as what it is for a lot of people. And so when we got out of the studio and started actually playing it, because we had to learn the song when we came out of the studio, you know, and actually playing it. And I'm crazy about just not changing feels, but just reassigning them sometimes to a different part of the kit.
Yeah. I love that. For any of you Drumeo students, we have the full transcription of that, and I believe the whole album on Drumeo, so you can check out exactly what Tommy played on all those fills. And we also did a full playthrough of that, and you can hear probably the highest quality drum version of that song.
Because there isn't one.
Yeah, I know, right?
You're not going to hear it on
this
that record.
kit. So it's, stay tuned for that.
There's a lot more that went on in the rhythm section than you're ever going to hear on that record, because you don't hear it. You don't hear a lot of the amazing stuff that Bob was playing. And that whole session and that whole time period was very... It was such a dichotomy of emotions, you know, because it was in the same studio, and it was the first record after the, you know, how do you follow those 2 Randy Rhoads albums, you know? It's no matter if you come out with 10 million sales, you're still, it's a fail.
Yeah.
And the spirit of Randy was the same studio, Ridge Farm. His vibe was still in there, and it was bittersweet. It was great to be in that room where he did that stuff, but it was also a bummer because he wasn't there, you know.
Yeah.
It really took my hat off to Jake. It was some big shoes, you know, and a lot of pressure on him. So
we're going to talk a little bit more about Randy Rhoads later on. I want to get some more stories from you, but we're going to transition into a Whitesnake tune called "Here I Go Again." I guess this is a live version that you did.
Oh yeah, I think this is from the live DVD. Maybe it's in London. I can't remember the name of the theater, but David probably screams it out somewhere on the album.
And can you tell us just a little bit about this song? I believe it's one of the biggest Whitesnake tunes.
It is "Here I Go Again," and on the '87 record, Ainsley Dunbar plays on that session. And very few people know that "Here I Go Again" was on a previous. There's been several interpretations of this song because it was written with Barney Marsden and David Coverdale. Barney Marsden was one of the early guitar players with Whitesnake. Real sweetheart of a guy, great guitar player. And it's been interpreted by several different incarnations or musicians within the Whitesnake narrative, so to speak. And I don't remember who played on the first version of it. It was 3 or 4 albums before the '87. Most people in America never ever even heard it, but true Whitesnake fans knew about the earlier version of "Here I Go Again." But again, Ainsley played on the studio version, and this is kind of my take of the same thing. And it's such an awesome tune because when we played it, it's the biggest tune that Whitesnake's ever had, and it was in the top 5, you know, globally for weeks, months.
Yeah.
And when you play a song like that, you just start it off, and people love you.
Yeah.
You can do no wrong, you know. And the parts are just built in. It's not one of those tunes where you go to the bridge section or the chorus section. The parts are just so built in. It's very dramatic, and it's a ballad. Yeah. But it's got some real thunder going on in places. The bridge section is crazy cool. You know, the solo section.
Yeah.
I think Adrian played on the album version of it.
I love what you said. You said the song plays itself.
It plays itself.
I love that. So this is "Here I Go Again" by Whitesnake.
Searching for
I don't really know what to say. It was incredible.
It's a ballad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a little bit different from the studio version. That's for sure.
I don't
there's some
think I'd have
energy
gotten
in
away
there.
with that
Yeah.
in the studio. No.
Yeah.
Tommy, could you save that for your solo record? Yeah.
I think I want that on the record. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, like you're doing obviously the showmanship stuff where you're bringing the snare hand up.
And the stick dropping part, did you get that
That
part?
recovery was incredible. That's an A+. Man. And then in the verses, or I guess the choruses, where you just have that driving snare drum going on all 4 beats.
Yeah, that was it. Well, that was on the original too.
Yeah.
And even though there have been some different interpretations of it, that's the tune that really set, DC on his real, global domination course. And it's interesting that it's only in the differences the way it was treated, the way it was approached. It was other people's interpretation of it. And then so it's meaningful.
Yeah. Love that. So when it came to the Whitesnake shows, you would try to remain true to the original song, but you would always change up those parts to add some energy for the live show. I assume you changed things slightly on most of the tunes, or were there any that you just learned what was on the record?
Well, I'd always try to start. A good way to answer that was David, a couple of albums ago, he wanted to revisit some of his time with Deep Purple.
Yeah.
Not totally revamp all the songs, be faithful to them. And to be honest, I never really listened much to Deep Purple after Ian Gillan left,
Yeah.
That was the era of Deep Purple that I knew. So apart from Burn, you'd have to be, in your grave not to be familiar with Burn. And that was David's first record with them. And so I wasn't familiar with anything subsequent to that.
Yeah.
And so it was music new to me. And when DC phoned me, we were originally going to go in and do the album that followed that. But he kind of inserted this in there. So we had worked all this other material. And he said, Thomas, I'm thinking about revisiting, this, that, and the other. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, well, David, I don't have much of a handle on any of that. He said, perfect. Do your thing.
Yeah.
Do your thing. And so I just listened enough to get the arrangements and stuff. And Ian Pacey plays on it and some incredible stuff on it, but it wasn't in my collection or in my, in my sphere of listening. So I approached it exactly how he encouraged me to do it, And we tried to, when you hear the music and what attracted to people to whatever tune on the album that were attracted to that particular tune, we would make sure that those elements are in it. Otherwise, if you get a chocolate cake and it's all vanilla, then you say, "Where's my chocolate cake?"
Exactly.
You can't take too much license.
Yeah.
And so when the guy that's driving the whole thing encourages you to do whatever it is that you would do if you were in that session. That's precisely what he asked me to do.
Yeah.
And so And so it was interesting, the way that I approached things, because I didn't even listen to a lot of the stuff. I got David's guy to make some roughs without any drums in it, with just click, and tried to approach it that way. And I did listen just to be mindful.
Yeah.
And Ian Pace plays, you can't copy Ian Pace.
Yeah.
And I've never been a monkey see, monkey do kind of guy ever, sometimes to my demise, I'm not the best copy drummer in the world, but he played some awesome stuff on it. And I just tried to insert, just more than anything, not modernize it, because that would be disrespectful to say that, but using today's technology, making, just dressing it up a little, making it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, and stuff from a sonic perspective.
Yeah. What I love is you've been doing this for so long, you've played with so many projects, that you're at the point where people want Tommy Aldridge on the music. They don't want you to try to be someone else. Like, you've developed your sound and your style, that's what people are coming to you for. And I think that's a really cool thing for a drummer to have after playing for so many years.
Well, I'm just thankful for so many people that have such crappy taste in drumming.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
I mean, that's very flattering. I mean, I don't believe that to be the case, but everyone that I've worked with, Randy was always saying, "T, make it heavier, you know?
Yeah.
You couldn't make it heavy enough for Randy."
Yeah.
And Gary Moore, make it heavy, man, we need it heavy, you know? And David Coverdale, if say what you will about him, he knows how to bring folks in that he likes what they do and gives you free rein. And when David comes to you with a musical idea, it's usually a pretty solid idea. And so I always encourage him, give me some ideas, and rather than somebody standing over you, kind of browbeating you to play this or play that, you know, because I know some dear friends that have guys involved in the band, the front guys that really impose a lot of different things. When someone comes to you in the tune, they want to have a Charlie Watts kind of vibe, and they give you a pair of Charlie Watts sticks to play to track the song with.
What do I do with these?
The guy, when someone hears this, he'll thank me for bringing this in. But that's not what you do, you know. If you don't, it's really brings the best out of people. David Coverdale knows how to do that.
Yeah, love that. I wanted to ask you just a bit more about playing with Randy. You talked a little bit about that, and just from what I've heard from this week with you being here at the studio, it seems like you guys had a real bond that it seems like you haven't had with a lot of musicians over the years. So what was that like, being so close with Randy in the studio, touring with him? Like, what was he like?
He was an incredible guy, and all the things that I feel and say about Randy, I felt in that moment at that time, not subsequent to his passing. Because a lot of times when people pass, they become, put on the pedestal and become iconic legends and so forth. And sometimes it's due in most part because they're just not around anymore. Yeah. I had these same, same feelings and opinions of Randy Rhoads when I was with him and when he was here. Incredible dude, man. Not just musically, obviously, the music that he's composed only on those 2 albums has impacted. I mean, what John Bonham, the effect at John Bonham, he changed the complexion of rock drumming.
Yeah.
He did,
yep,
in a universal level. I think Randy Rhoads did it on the guitar in 2 albums. And he didn't have to pass away, in a tragic plane crash to do that. He was just getting started. The only thing that exceeded his unparalleled facility on the instrument I've been around some pretty heavy hitters throughout my career. The guitar players that I've worked with, I look at the list and I say, how did this ever happen? When did they hit their collective heads hard enough to have me playing drums with them, But the only thing that surpassed his unparalleled ability on the instrument and his compositional, he was so full of so much information that was just coming out. I don't care what anybody read, what you say or what you read or hear on a podcast. That's Randy Rhoads music that you're hearing on those 2 albums. There's a lot of other people contributing to it, but the backbone of what's going on there, the brain and the heart of what's going on there is Randall Rhoads. Yeah. I know. I saw it firsthand. And the only thing that exceeded all these amazing attributes that he had was his sweetness. Sweet guy.
Yeah. I love that, and I know you can read so much
Sweet
online and in the books and stuff, but no one can speak to that like you can. Yeah. Because you were there.
And being in the company of someone like that, it raises your level of play. It kind of grabs you by the scruff of your neck, and they just involuntarily unconsciously pull you up to their level, and it's the truth. Yeah. Because Radio Sarzo will talk to you about a lot of those things too. He and Randy were extremely close, and because of the intensity that was going on, and there was so much drama around who and stuff, we kind of really clung together. It was really a really tight unit. We hung out together. We didn't just play on stage together, and it was really the high water mark for me in a lot of regards. And I've been blessed with an incredibly long career.
Yeah. And would you say, you mentioned Randy would always want it heavier, and would he encourage you as a drummer to get outside the box and try different things? I think you mentioned he would sometimes sing like drum riffs to you.
It was incredible. He would sing a drum part to you. He would sing it to me as an idea. We'd jam it at sound checks and stuff. He would sing a drum part to me, and I would just teasingly say, well, how does it go, Randy? And he would sing it back to me, and it would be exactly the same thing.
Crazy.
Because there was another member of the group who would say, I have an idea for a song, and he would sing it to you, and Randy would say, could you sing it one more time? And he'd go, ooh, and it would be something completely different. So,
See if you can guess who.
so it was an interesting contrast, you know?
I love that.
That person shall remain nameless, of course.
For Tommy's safety.
And everyone else.
Yeah. Love it. Let's switch gears for a second. I just want to talk about your drum kit because it has a look to it, and you've been playing this kind of setup for quite a while. So maybe talk about why your cymbals are flat and why you ended up with this type of setup.
There's no, I mean, somebody like Tommy, you go look at this and I go and you look at this and you say, dude, you need professional help. Because it defies all the ergonomics of what you should have. I shouldn't have all this stuff, especially at my incrable age. You know, I shouldn't be able to reach.
Quite amazing how you can reach up here so easily.
It's fun. When I first started, actually, I used a single rack for a long time, and I'm on the next, the tour that unfortunately got canceled because David got sick, because wasn't able to use that kit. But I stayed pretty close to the same basics. I mean, I'm changing cymbals and weights and things like that, you know. But the basic setup, it's silly. The reason I have level cymbals, when I was growing up, I used Rogers drums, and at the time they had the Swivel-matic stuff, and the cymbal, the tilter was a separate part.
Yeah.
And you could buy the stand, and if you bought the tilter, it was extra. It was another $38 or something like that extra. And I said, I wanted another stand, and so I'd buy another stand. And that same mindset kept going until I had several cymbals, because I just wanted more places to go out of boredom. And by the time I got all the stands that I wanted, I had played with them level for so long. When I bought a couple of the tilters, I just left them straight, you know.
Yeah.
And so wasn't planned. I get criticized for sitting so low, literally criticized for sitting so low. I don't post anything that I do. I don't think I'm worthy of posting anything on social media or online. Anything that's out there, someone else has done it. So I didn't post pictures of me from the back that shows my throne height. I would like to wear a size 8.5 shoe, but I wear a 9.5.
If it works, it works.
I'm sorry, I wear a 9.5. I can't wear an 8.
Yeah.
You can punish me for wearing a 9.5.
Preference is preference.
Yeah, and so Jeff Porcaro sat even lower than this.
Yeah.
Nico McBrain sits even lower than this. So that's the first time I've ever been criticized for my throne height.
Yeah.
Come on, snap out of it. All these sideliners need to find something else to get bummed out about.
Go play some drums.
Yeah, go play some drums instead of chopping everybody else up, man. Come on. And it just, that's how my cymbals got the way they did. And my kit, I've always sat low because I grew up sitting on a couple of, playing on a couple of milk case things, and they were this high, 24.5 inches. And it wasn't planned, it just happened, you know.
Yeah.
And I have as many cymbals as I do, just so the different sounds that I get out at them. And I enjoy having somewhere else to go. Like there's a tune, a Whitesnake tune, Crying in the Rain, in the guitar solo section. Yeah. Well, it just so happens that the drum part goes double time there, and it's like hog heaven. And to be able to go all these different places at that tempo within a groove is nice, you know. It's a lot of fun. It's just somewhere else to go, and it adds also, again, back to the visual thing, the video age. You know, this is a video, you know. The reason you guys are successful is because of video. Yeah. And the amazing drummers that you have in here. I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing here? I've never been so intimidated in my life.
The other thing I was going to ask too, you do a lot with, I mean, in the solos over the years, you use your hands a lot. Was that inspired by a particular drummer, or is that something that you just decided to do in your solos?
The drummer that became famous doing that, the first drummer that became famous doing that was John Bonham. I mean, on a really big level. And he's the one that everyone goes to, oh, guy's playing with his hands. It was incredible. Apart from everything else that John Bonham is. The first person that I ever heard play drums with their hands was a drummer called Frosty, and he was with Lou Michaels, it was a two-piece band. Big, huge B3 with bass pedals, and he played the bass notes with his feet. And Frosty was this huge drummer with platinum blonde hair, looked like a big surfer dude, and he played a solo with his hands. I saw that when I was a kid. So this was pre-Zeppelin, so that was the first person I'd ever heard. when I started doing it, when I was a little kid in my rehearsal room, because my father didn't even know that I was a drummer until my Ozzy days, really. A professional drummer, because he didn't support it, and he thought you're either you have some deviant sexual problems and you're a drug addict, or a combination of both if you were in the music business.
Yeah.
And so my mom was somewhat supportive. So I hid it from my father for literally decades. And so I would practice when my dad was home and put towels in the shed in the back, and I mentioned earlier, and put towels over the mess around like that, because I wasn't through playing for the day.
Yeah.
I didn't set a timer for my rehearsal time. I just go in my little drum room and just play for hours, and my mom would come and grab me and say it's time to have lunch, and then boom, I'm back.
Yeah.
And so when Dad was in, I would still sneak out, not sneak, but I'd go out into my room and I'd put blankets over them or towels. Interesting sounds out of it.
Yeah.
Very subtle stuff,
So when you were doing this live in a big arena or something like that, did you ever, especially with the cymbals, did you ever like cut your hands?
Ever? Oh.
I'm sure you did, but
you have to be careful. These things are shiny and they sound awesome, but they're sharp as hell on the edges, boy.
Yeah.
And I've cut myself. If I don't pay really close attention, you have to pay attention when you start hitting really sharp stuff with your hands. Obviously, it goes without saying, but I've cut myself. I keep waiting for all the, arthritis and all the things that a lot of drummers that don't do all this silly stuff that are starting to have, and thank the good Lord I don't have any issues. I have a lot of calluses. I have more calluses more than my gardener has.
Yeah.
But, and it was just something, it was never ever planned on to use it in a room with humans.
Yeah.
It was a rehearsal thing that I just passing my time in the studio, It was just fun. And so later on, when I was maybe in my mid-teens, we put a little band together. It was like a Santana Speed Freak band.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned it to you earlier. And the bass player would double on congas, and the congas were right here. And so he would join me in the solo, and I started just reaching up. And when I would play the congas in the bar where we were playing, they would go ballistic. The crowd, and I said, "Oh, that works."
This
so
works.
I just whatever works.
Yeah.
And you learn it from playing. And people, young drummers say, well, what should I do? Play in front of as many people as you can, as soon as you can. Because it's different than rehearsing.
Yeah.
You find the stuff that works. I'm not so presumptuous to think that all these people that think that I know what I'm actually doing, I know that it's because, like in that section, I get together with the sound guy. Can you bring my kick drums down a couple of dBs, maybe boost the top, open up the gates on the toms so that things are open more? So it compensates, because there's no way, because I'm playing almost, and I try to back off on the level on my kick drums dynamically and still be articulate. It's not easy to do, you know. So I work with the sound guy so that we can get the most impact, so my hands and stuff just doesn't disappear underneath the bass drums, you know, because the mix wouldn't,
translate,
And I'm not so presumptuous to think that people out there that if you have to do a meet and greet and you meet a young up and coming kid that's, like a 10-year-old kid, and he thinks, man, I thought you would be bigger, because you want to be bigger than life.
Yeah.
Kiss's whole claim to fame is they're bigger than life, you know? And when you find get a little input from people that have been in the audience, and you say, oh, it's actually working. You play to the people back in the nosebleed section and be overly demonstrative. And I do these silly things just trying to connect to them and give them something in the cheap seats,
Yeah.
And it works.
I love that. And I think that's something a lot of people forget. They're quick to judge showmanship and everything that isn't actually playing the drums, but that's such a thoughtful approach when you're thinking about the person who paid money to be at that concert.
Well, there's also a lot of motivation. When I was growing up, I wanted to play drums. was that Joe Morello playing drums. The first music that really captivated me was Take 5 by the Brubeck Quartet. And I killed myself as a kid trying to figure out all those 5/4, you know?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the Beatles come out, are available, and people, and my buddy says, why don't you learn some Beatles songs? And I said, oh, okay, I'll check it out. And I learned the whole album in an afternoon, you know? So, but it's, you have to, I've learned and played the music that's emotionally accommodated me. I'm not a session cat. I don't have anywhere near that kind of vocabulary to be the first to say it. I never aspired to be that.
Yeah.
So I try to encourage young and up-and-coming guys, if you want to be a journeyman drummer and you really want to work every day, day in and day out, learn all the stuff that other people want you to learn. And I've only learned the stuff that I wanted to learn, and there's tons of holes in my playing. Thankfully, I was in an era coming up where it was a lot less dense. There were a lot fewer drummers. There were fewer people going for the, going for the gold. I mean, it's really full of really amazing drummers out there right now. And because you guys are very well educated and motivated, you know. I mean, what you guys have done is been responsible for literally raising the bar. The resource that you guys provide, and I'm not just, patting you on the back, it's the truth. For a young drummer, when I was a kid, if I could have seen something broken down and slowed down, because I don't care how observant you are, even as a really gifted drummer, somebody can play something so fast as you can't tell what's going on until they slow it down, in many cases, because I've been there and done that, So it's... it depends on what your dream is. I never dreamt to be a session guy. I admire, some of my favorite drummers are hey, it kills me to see somebody go into a ska session, run down the street and do do a heavy or a Latin session and own it, to some degree. Yeah. Could you imagine Buddy Rich playing a John Bonham groove?
Exactly.
It ain't gonna happen, dude. And Buddy Rich is the cat. Yeah. But he's not gonna play a John Bonham groove, I'm sorry. He never did. No one ever asked him to because he'd have shot him. And that's no disrespect to Buddy Rich. He knew he was a big band cat. That was his thing, that's what he does. Yeah.
No, that's some great advice, especially for all the younger drummers out there. And I even remember, like, growing up, I was a big Whitesnake, the '87 record, big fan of that, and also Bark at the Moon. And I remember I would listen to it and go on YouTube and try to find ways to learn it, but there was nothing. So that's why, to me, this is such a special way of doing things, because we can almost, the things that I was looking for as a kid, you're here teaching those parts and giving drummers a chance to actually see what was actually played in those sessions and talk about it. So for me, it's really special, but that's great advice for all the drummers out there.
It's really important, especially young drummers coming up, that they don't lose hope if they can't play a blast beat at 300 BPM. I mean, that's supernatural activity,
Agreed.
And you don't have to play a blast beat at 300 BPM to be accessible. This is the only job I've ever had, and I'm the biggest doofus in the universe. This is the only job that I've ever had. I've never worked at anything else. Yeah. I mean, I've worked hard at everything else, but it's always been an avocation and not my vocation. And this was the most fun that I had when I was a kid, and I still love playing drums as much as I ever have. It's just that the other 22 hours of the day get a little bit more complex, and some of the stuff that comes along with it, And what I aspired to be when I was a kid and growing up, I just tried to tailor and try to maximize your strengths and minimize my weaknesses. But it's important, young drummers coming up, you don't have to play at 300 BPM to be really successful and make a... John Bonham is an incredible drummer, but it's not technical. It's not that technical. It's what they did collectively, whereas all the technical part comes in, because it's, again, that's supernatural stuff. Yeah. It's iconic and it's genius. And they did it collectively as a unit. Yeah. What Plant is doing with his phrasing against the rhythm section stuff, it's just mind-boggling. If you take the drum part out, it's like this. You put a click on it, it's all over the shop. Yeah. It's not about the click, Yeah. It's about music.
Awesome. Tommy, thank you so much. The hour has flown by.
Wow, it's been an hour?
It's been an hour.
Thanks for putting up with me, and thank you guys so much for having me up here. Again, walking down the hallway, coming in the studio, because I've watched some of you guys' stuff that you put out, and it's a little intimidating coming in here. I mean, these guys make you feel so comfortable, and then you realize everybody in here could be a professional drummer who just happened to have a high-resolution camera in their hands.
The cameras are the scariest part. Well, Tommy, like I said, it's long overdue, and it's an absolute honor to have you here, and it's just been such a great week, and I can't wait for all of you out there to see all the amazing stuff that we filmed with Tommy. And I guess before we play the last track, do you have any final parting words or final advice for all the drummers out there watching?
Have fun. Have fun. And when you have fun doing something, you want to do it all the time, all the time, all the time, because that's pretty much what it takes, you know. Have fun doing it, and be nice to your fellow drummer. Share licks with them. All the guitar players are going like this, you know, and hiding stuff. Oh, I don't want the guy to see this, you know, until I get it on the record, you know. But so I think the fraternity of drummers is pretty cool that way. I'm so proud to have spent my days here on this planet playing these things. It's an awesome gig. Believe me, take it up. It's a lot of fun, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Tommy. So this last track Tommy's going to play is called Enough of Your Love by the band Iconic. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you all later.
Thanks, guys.